Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time tuning into the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. Welcome, by the way, to the #1 podcast on innovative teamwork. To my regular listeners, here we go again. Another gem, another incredible story. Buckle your seats, buckle your seatbelts because we are about to hear some incredibly inspiring stuff. And, John, normally I don't do this, but based on everything that you have out there, I'm going to just read the bio from your Instagram straight, like read it verbatim, what you have.
Okay.
So we have CEO of the Brink Group, age 83, author, podcast host, ADHD advocate, business mentor, serial entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and competitive bodybuilder. Did I mention age 83? Okay, did I mention age 83? So, with all that, kind of fill us in because that's kind of the end game and, kind of seeing that is the finished product. But you grew up in some very difficult times. You grew up kind of seeing some things. I believe it was World War I or stuff like that. So, just kind of give us World War II, right? Give us a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of fill in the blanks from everything that I just read. So the floor is yours, man.
Okay, sounded all good. You got it pretty well right. I believe I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. At 83 and at 85, I will be competing in the Arnolds for the second time being qualified for it.
Wow.
Anyway, so you'll talk about that a bit more. I was born in northeastern part of Holland in November the 1st, 1940. And the Second World War started, Holland was invaded by the dictator Adolf Hitler in May of 1940. My parents were married in 1938. They were in love. They very quickly had a son and then a daughter. My dad had a career in the lumber industry, and they had a house, a place they were renting first.
My goodness.
And it was paradise.
Yeah.
Everything was beautiful. And then what happened? The dictator Adolf Hitler invaded Holland, but before he did, my dad was drafted into the Dutch army. And the last time they heard from him was that the last time he was seen, just before the bombing of Rotterdam, the whole center of Rotterdam, the biggest cities in Holland, was devastated and bombed by the Germans because Holland didn't surrender quick enough for them, and it killed thousands and thousands of people. So from that point forward, my mom was on her own with two little kids. It was May of 1940. Then I came along in November 1940, and then things became extremely difficult because, war is difficult.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I remember as being 3.5, 4 years old is when the Allied forces were bombing Germany, and we were in the northeastern part of Holland, within 10 or 15 minutes from the German border. And I can still hear the sound from the time I was 3.5, 4 years old, 80 years ago, the sound of hundreds of bombers, 300 bombers, 350 bombers in the air. And in the distance, we could see them bombing Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg, all of those places. And way in the distance, the sky was red. And my mom would take us outside because not to look at the beautiful plains, but the sound was unbelievable. But it was safer outside than inside. The next thing that I remember is what they call the hunger winter, it was the Germans had cut off all food supply to Holland, and there was nothing to eat. A lot of kids and older people died because of lack of food. It was also the coldest winter on record in Holland. And I remember being then 4.5 years old. We and my brother and sister were 1 and 2 years older than me. Every morning we would go out, the three of us, with gunny sacks into the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable. And then the next thing is the Canadian Army liberated us on April the 12th, 1945,
Mm.
and we saw far too much that we should not have seen. And but it made such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward, when I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I wanted to go when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. And
Right.
then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, and then I finally went to Canada when I was 23. And
Right.
so, but started with nothing,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing. I wanted to prove to myself that I was not successful academically. I
Right.
failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, "What are we going to do with this guy?" And so some people said, "Well, send him to the mentally challenged school." My parents said, "No, we're not going to do that. We'll teach him a trade." And my dad was in lumber, and so they decided at 13 I left school and I should go to a furniture factory and become a furniture maker.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did, and I really enjoyed it. And so and from that point forward, at 13, I became kids are hard on each other, right? So all
Yeah.
the kids that I went to school with in grade 7 went to college and university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but
Yeah.
then it was kind of down on. And
Yeah, and I want to make sure I pause you on this point because one of the things as I was listening to you earlier that was incredibly intriguing and I guess sort of alarming to me was you didn't find out that you had ADHD until much later. And when it comes to you finding that out, there may be a parent listening in that doesn't know if their kid has ADHD, or there's teachers that kind of shrug off kids that have actually a condition. How do you kind of, and I know you have a book on it too, so you can feel free to speak on it as well. How do you think your academic life or your school life would have been different had there been just some awareness on your condition and how you were able to move forward and things of that nature?
a very good question, Aswand, is that everything would have been different.
Wow.
And that's what I feel so strongly about it now, to share with other people my experience with ADHD. The book that you're referring
See it.
to
I
is
see it. My man got it. I like it.
yeah. And but for me, I never knew about it. And so I came to Canada in 1965. And
Mhm.
then I left because it was my dream. But the other part is I wanted to start with nothing because I wanted to prove to me that I was just as smart as the other people that
Right.
had gone to college or university. And so I took a suitcase, leaving Holland, 3 books, two
Right.
sets of clothes, and some money. And
Well,
not that
I gotta pause you there. $25, folks. $25. I want to make sure I get the number right for you. He had 25, yes, and he still has it there. $25.47. So when he says some money, doesn't mean a 2000, whatever. He needs $25.47. Go ahead.
That's exactly what I had when I came to Prince George in
Hmm.
July 1965. But what I had lots of attitude. I was always an optimist, no matter how tough things get, still today, that
Hmm.
no matter how tough things, I always know tomorrow will be a better. I will not tolerate around me negative. Passion,
Absolutely.
harder than anybody.
Mhm.
And whatever I do, I give it 120%. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody. I still get up, even at nearly 84. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I'm always in a hurry. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what I do. But the interesting thing about ADHD
Mhm.
is that I was already successful when I came here. Very quickly, I became a supervisor in the lumber mill, and
Right.
then all very quickly. And then in the first 2 years, I already was part owner of a little mill. I could barely speak the language
Mhm.
at that time because, and then, but I still didn't feel good about myself. I still, everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful." I didn't feel that way
Mhm.
until one day, 32 years later, in 1997, I came here in July 65. In January 1997, after 32 years, I walked into a store and I picked up a book, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction.
Mm-hmm.
written by Dr. Halliwell, who is an author of 18 books, 5 on distraction, is ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
as well as he is dyslexic, so am I, and extremely successful. I picked up the book and I had no idea. I still don't know why did I pick up that book, and I opened the book and it was about ADHD.
Mm.
And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And so I wrote in the book in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. And so that's changed my life.
Yeah.
And then it took me another 5 years before I went to my doc after I looked in the book and read about it. And it was considered to be a disorder of some sort, or a stigma. And so I went to my doctor, who's delivered our 2 daughters, was
Mm-hmm.
a personal friend after 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I've got ADHD." And so he looked at it. "Yeah, I do." And so by then I was 62 years old.
Right.
And so it had been from the time I was 13,
Mm-hmm.
left school, and all kinds of people made comments about I'm dumb and stupid and I have mental, and all of those negative things. But I didn't pay attention to it, but I did in a way. It kind
Yeah,
of
you can't ignore that kind of stuff at that age.
exactly. And
Right.
so it took me 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
as one before I knew I had ADHD. So, uh, but not only did I know that I had ADHD, by then already I knew it was a superpower,
Yeah,
and
and
I still believe that today.
yeah, that you actually beat me to what I was going to make sure I emphasize to the listeners is understand the typical school day or the typical school system. You get told to read a book for a test. You get told to read a book and never remember it. You get told to read a book, all right, put A, B, C on a test, and all of a sudden you're labeled as smart or average or whatever it is. If you are a listener listening in now, regardless of where your situation, you have to peel back from the story. He went and the book found him and he applied the information and built something from it. You cannot allow the teachers, you cannot allow the system, you cannot allow all the other bullshit that goes on in our system where they just kind of toss kids to the side that are quote unquote normal. You got to step up, take advantage. And I love the fact that you mentioned your parents were like, I'm not putting him in no dumps. I'm not putting him in a sit. I'm going to raise him. I'm going to make sure he's okay. They at least showed you, hey, you can be somebody regardless of what the system says. And me as a teacher now, that's something that I try to implore to our young people all the time, to our parents all the time. And it actually brings me to something I really do want to I want you to kind of educate not only myself, but educate our listeners on a little bit because you have I guess you can call it a passion project today, listening to you for the first time. I wasn't even aware that this was an issue in regards to how we're treating our wood, the lumber issues, and maybe how it's causing homes not to be built, and some of the things that you were getting into in regards to some of the problems that our forest is having. I really want you to kind of dive into that a little bit just to not only educate myself, but educate the listeners about something that you're obviously very passionate about. You saw your dad do it and you made it a point to say, hey, I'm going to put my name behind a lot of the work that's going on in the wood, like in the forest and the wrongdoings, I should say, that's going on in the forest and how we treat our wood. So again, the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, so quite correctly so. My dad was in lumber, and
Mm-hmm.
my grandfather was a master carpenter, and so it is quite normal actually, and I loved it as well that I would go into that particular trade, but not just for the reasons that they were in it. I loved it. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it right from the time I was 13. But then my dream became that obviously I was struggling with the fact that I had failed grade 3 and failed grade 7 3 times, and
Right.
getting so I wanted to prove to me that I was just as smart as all the others. The advantage that I had, I learned lots about lumber and manufacturing of lumber, and I then had the dream to go to Canada, but not just to go to Canada, to start with nothing. I
Mm-hmm.
could speak, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, but I knew I would build a lumber mill, and I did. I did it different than all the others. And the time, and this is encouragement for all my friends, male, female out there
Hmm.
that have the benefit of ADHD, is that I had a big advantage over many others, is that I had learned a lot of things, not through the schooling system, but
Hmm.
being on the job with my hands. And so I built a number of lumber companies here. I'm not talking about how successful I am. That's not the story.
Right.
But I started from nothing. It was tough going. But the advantage that I had is what happened to me right from the beginning, the early part of the war, going out with gunny sacks looking for food. I still can feel the feeling of hunger. I can still feel the feeling of cold and anxiety of
Hmm.
losing the only parent that we had during the war
Yeah.
is my mom, and that was the inner child.
Hmm.
And so, but in spite of all of that, I kept going and knew that I would be successful. And a lot of people said to me, "You got to write a book about this."
Hmm.
And but it's now if you kind of think about it, as when I grew up in northeastern Holland, that's where they speak Dutch, but Dutch is High Dutch. Where I grew up was a dialect, so I had to go from. I love speaking dialect. The
Yeah.
people of High Dutch, they don't understand when I speak dialect,
Right.
so I had to acquire speaking High Dutch. I
Hmm.
barely had that under control. Then I go to Canada now to learn to speak English,
And then
and
you got it. Right. I got you. Right.
And then I wrote another book about that,
Hmm.
Against All Odds.
Right.
And that's about not how successful John is. No, it's about all the ups and downs along the way and staying the course. And then the other one that I believe in is attitude, passion, work ethic
Right.
is the foundation, but will follow his success.
So the causes that you're a part of and the things that you saw with the lumber mills, the challenges that you may have saw day to day to get certain contracts and stuff like that. Can you speak a little bit about how those day to days were and how those rough times were in terms of getting the business up and running, making it so people understand it's an issue? You know, what did you have to go through? What did you have to really do to make it so you built this business and actually fix this issue?
Yeah, the for me, lumber manufacturing was something that I grew up in even when I was 13. My grandfather
And
did,
did you
my dad.
see issues? You saw issues like even at 13, like they were
Oh yeah.
probably exposed to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I wanted to go. That's the
Right.
direction I wanted to go in.
Right.
And then going to Canada and saying, Canada, where in Canada would I then be going if I want to build a lumber mill or I have the opportunity? British Columbia. Because if you look at, for all our guests watching us, Canada, big country, obviously, British Columbia, big province. I'm about in Prince. So I want to flew into Montreal, took the train across Canada. It's a long way, 4 days, 5 nights.
Yeah, I've been to
Stopped
Canada. That's not no easy trip right there. That's a pretty long trip.
So I stopped in Vancouver, went to the immigration department, but I
Uh-huh.
couldn't speak English. But there was a German fellow, I could speak some German. I
Right.
told him what I wanted to do. I want to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That's where I am now, 60 years. That's about 500 miles north
Right.
of Vancouver. And it's in the middle of the province. Lots of trees, lots of forest, and lots of opportunity.
That's what I want to applaud you there because this is a very, very, very valid point. And as again, as a listener, if you got a goal, if you have a mindset, if you know what you want, I want to make sure you're really tuned in to this part of it. When you go to this guy and you say, I want to build a lumber mill, what was that actual moment in that conversation like? Because when you know what you want, I always say it all the time. When you actually really know specifically what you want, there's gonna be a way. You will find a way to get there. You'll go and you'll walk to another state or country. You'll move wherever it is you have to. Me myself, I knew I wanted to be in Florida, so I drove from Maryland, 16 hours just to get here. So can you kind of walk us through that moment where he said, "Go to Prince George," and then again, 60 years later, you see the result.
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to build a lumber mill. I knew I had to go to British Columbia. I didn't know which place in British Columbia, but
Yeah.
I wanted to start with nothing. So then when I came off the bus, couldn't speak language, didn't know soul, and didn't have a job, but I had $25.47.
Hmm.
And uh, and so within a year, I was a superintendent of one of the larger lumber mills here because I had experience and I'm good at what I do.
Got
And
it.
I had attitude, passion, work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
plenty. And so then an opportunity presented itself within a year and a half. I was superintendent already. I had it made.
Mm-hmm.
You've used a lot of, but not for me. I wanted to build a mill. I wanted to buy an ownership,
Yeah.
but you need money for that. So I thought there was an opportunity to buy into a small lumber mill,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I did. Okay, John, where was it? It was in Watson Lake, Yukon.
Hmm.
And that's another 600, 500 miles further north.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 miles north of Vancouver. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I went in July of 1967 and became general manager, part owner of Watson Lake Lumber. Now, the interesting thing about Watson Lake is that in the wintertime, the coldest that I've seen there is 62 below zero.
He said coldest.
Coldest,
Wow.
62 below zero.
Yeah, that's
So I was there for 5 years.
that's cold. No, just leave it at that.
So I stayed there for 5 years, then started, went back to Prince George, where I am now, started with virtually with nothing, 3 employees, and started a lumber manufacturing plant, adding value to, because the trees were all taken by other people. So
Right.
I had to find a way of producing a product that was that I could create a demand for. What helped me
Yes.
is I had experience from the time that I was 13 years old. I understand manufacturing. I understand lumber. I know what you can do with it. I
Hmm.
see opportunity. So, so that's what I did, and started with 3 employees. Today we have 3 or 4 different companies, lumber companies, and probably employing in the lumber side alone around 400 people or so. And then I also have a warehousing company, warehousing logistics and distribution, the largest one in northern British Columbia. And then we do real estate, residential, industrial, commercial, and industrial.
So what was
So
that launch product that you were able to create the demand for?
I took lower quality lumber, broke it down, took the defects out of it, laminated it back together again in finger joining. So that made the product not equal to, but better than the existing solid products.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I started with, was the first one to do that
Mm-hmm.
in Canada, and then developed a market for it, mainly in the United States, actually. And, so, and now nearly 50 years ago, my company quite successful. And,
So
you know,
what was it like? What was the alternative before you came up with that, and how? Because I want to make sure listeners understand that these great brand businesses build businesses. It doesn't happen with what you probably see on TV. It starts with one product, fixing one problem, and fixing that alternative or making it an alternative from something that people didn't know. Actually, currently in the process of listening to a book titled "The Challenger Sale" by Brent Adamson and Matt Dixon. And he's talking about how the real sellers, the ones that really hit it big, they challenge their client to think of a product in a brand new way or think of a problem in a brand new way. So what did you actually fix or what did you replace in the client's mind?
well, then I created a demand for that particular product slowly, gradually. It takes time to build it up.
Yeah.
The easy thing always, as one, is to buy an existing company, so that has been in operation. But I couldn't afford that. So I had to start something brand new,
All right.
find a product that, because of my experience, I could recognize that there was an opening in the marketplace, but then to get it off the ground, take some very innovative, and it's all in my book,
Mm-hmm.
Against All Odds.
Yeah.
The starting from the ground up is nothing. And so now 50 years later, it's been quite successful.
Yeah. One of my
Still is.
favorite speakers says, you don't need a down payment on vision. You don't need a down payment on vision. All right. You just figure it out. All right,
You're
so
absolutely right.
you're successful with the business. You're growing. You actually I didn't even know that, but now you also do real estate, commercial, residential, industrial, and all that. You're not just doing business in Canada.
No.
And again, the typical person now sees that you built your business. You're great. You're like, all right, I'm happy. They don't say, okay, I'm gonna do bodybuilding. So how can you can you fill in the blank in terms of, all right, I got a successful business and now I'm gonna put in more work and I'm gonna start doing some bodybuilding to add. So please just take it away.
As one, always, I was the same as everybody else is,
Yeah.
right? So and my wife is a vegetarian. I didn't listen very well.
Uh-huh.
I was not totally abusive in terms of what I eat,
Right.
but certainly not well enough. And
Mm-hmm.
then and I was one of the ones that every time at New Year, you're gonna make, I'm gonna do this, that, and I'm going to buy a membership to a gym,
Yep.
and we do
Well, I worked in
that.
fitness, so I had a lot of you, like the resolution month folks.
And you do that for about 3 weeks, and then you can find 100 reasons that you don't have the time
Right.
anymore.
Right.
And then something happens that gives you a shock. And what happened to me in 2008, I got a case of diverticulitis. There's a
Uh,
rupture of the colon, that it was not just pain, but a rupture. And if you don't get it attended quickly in about 48 hours, then it may kill you because it attacks all the healthy. I'm not a doctor, but that's basically. So I came about that close to
wow.
not making it. And then I knew I had to change direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an operation. They took out 12 centimeters of my colon, and and so then from there I was okay. Then from there, and then fairly quickly thereafter, in 2009, I
Mm-hmm.
started in earnest to go to the gym,
Right.
hired a trainer, and started to look very serious at diet, listening to my wife finally, and
Shout out to the wife. Shout out to guys. Shout out to the wife on this one.
so and then so after I've been in, and whatever I do, I give it 120%.
Right, right.
You know, so after I was in the gym for about 6 years, somebody came up to us and said, "Hey, John, you ever think about competing?" I
Mhm.
said, "Me? Yeah." I said, "Well, why not?"
Right.
And so I did. And I started competing, and for about 6, 7, 8 years. And then I started competing in Northern British Columbia, came in bodybuilding physique, came in second in bodybuilding, third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials. Came in
Mhm.
third in physique, second in bodybuilding. That qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds.
Mhm.
And then COVID came, and then so that kind of upset things. And so today I'm training again, for going to the Arnolds in 2025.
Mhm.
And
That in
so
Cali?
here, that's the last book that I wrote. Came out yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
This book.
I saw that, right.
Yeah. And that's what I'm doing now. And so what I'm saying is that at nearly 84, I'm very, very active in the gym. I
Mhm.
love to go it, and I'm very careful about my diet.
Right.
And so I feel great, and I'm still very, very busy. I work 12, 14 hours a day, and still have my companies and tend to expand them. And I enjoy life. Still writing another. I've done now 4 books, and I'm working on 2 other ones. One that comes out next April
Mhm.
about the lumber industry in British Columbia, and the other one is about, still no title, about communication issues, and so important. And that one comes out in August of 2025.
So kind of walk us through, because I have a fitness background. I've been in fitness and athletic sports background and stuff like that. And one of the things I always love talking about, and I always look putting the message out there, is how much being in shape and being in a regular workout routine, how much that actually helps your business. The two go hand in hand. The two are kind of just immediate. You're like the perfect person to speak on some of the similarities between getting in shape, being on a regular, like really watching what you eat, the whole thing, and how much that actually does help in business. So kind of walk us through that a little bit.
As one, it is critical for me in
Mm-hmm.
my business. So that's what gets me up in the morning at 5:30. That's what keeps me active, with all the things that I do, and so, and it makes me go back to the gym because, as you know, as somebody, once you get into the routine, I'm not saying that people should compete for the Olympics or bodybuilding or the Arnolds, but stay active. Make sure your body is in good shape, and diet so critically important, sleep so critically important, and so that once you take care of you and your body, everything is possible. And so for me, I would not be doing what I'm doing today if it were not for me making that turn about 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I like to tell people all the time the refreshing mindset that it gives you every single day. Because look, every day in business ain't gonna be pretty. You're not gonna always get the sale. It's not gonna always happen. It is not fashion. It is a fight club. Right? It's an absolutely competitive beast that you better be ready for. And if you're not mentally getting yourself ready, the whole self, you will be eaten up by these sharks out here. I'm telling you all. I usually tell my members that all the time. You got to keep this thing rolling because you can't just be in business and expect to, be out of shape and be able to compete with these folks at all.
I've done this for 70 years since the time I was 13. I'm 83 now. I
Yeah.
say, bring them on. I'll
Yeah.
challenge anyone. And
I
all those guys on CNN and all the other national networks that say, well, 80, you're too old and you should go to the old person's home and you need a nurse to guide you. I say, and that really gets me pissed off is those guys. So I'm going to send them a copy of my book and
yes.
say, guys, come on. And you want to talk politics, either in the United States, I don't know about all that much, but in terms of those, I have the mindset, and don't give me the bullshit that 80 is too old, and it's nothing to do with it. Age is just a number. It's your quality of life and being on the ball, getting up, taking care of your body, and then everything is possible.
Yeah, and I'm kind of reluctant to bring it up, but we have two. You're not in the States, but we have two presidential candidates that are a little like around your age, and there's every excuse made in the book about their age and how they're not ready and all that kind of stuff. So you are completely debunking that entire myth about you're too old to do this and you're too old to do that, and the world needs more people like you because what I've learned is because of that mindset. A lot of kids, I know, 23-year-olds who feel like they got to settle down. I know, little teenagers now that have decided, look, I'm getting too old, and they just stop living. And it's a tragic thing. It's a tragedy to actually see when young people just start giving up on their futures and things like that. So the world needs more of you, man.
Yeah, so what I hear as one is that the one guy is 80 and blah, he's too old and blah.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, the one guy, Joe Biden, is 81, and the other guy, Donald Trump, is 79. So what the
Right.
hell are you talking about? Is the one too old and the other is not? So what? It's about experience.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
experience,
And your
and then
priorities.
yeah. So but yeah, stay fit, stay in shape, read my book and
Yeah.
other people's books. And the other one that I say is that a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the stuff that you're doing? They're doing all this stuff. I say ADHD, that's how. It's a super.
Yeah, it's just it became your superpower. The thing, and I want to make sure I make this one. I want to make sure I'm on the record saying this. The thing that you actually got made fun of, the thing that you teased him about, is actually the superpower that's allowing him to actually build a legacy, build generational wealth for everyone that comes behind him. So again, I want to re-emphasize that be careful when it comes to you teasing people. Be careful with how you make young people feel because they're gonna get it. They're gonna click on once they realize what the superpower is. There's no stopping them. They become absolutely unstoppable. And with that, John, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just kind of put it out there? What's next? What do you see the next thing? Where is the organization going? Where are you trying to take it? And how can people, be a part of your vision and keep up with you and all that good stuff?
So I'm going to be very active in business. I think things are a little bit tough, like because the United States is a big part of our market here as well. But
Mm-hmm.
things will start picking up this fall. I think interest rate will come down. So we are expanding both on the lumber side, the real estate side, warehousing, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm a very active podcaster. I do about between 20 and 25 podcasts a month. Probably most of them being a host and then also guest, like on yours.
Right.
I love to do that, talking to the world. And
Yes.
then writing 2 other books. And, so life is great. And I fly around a lot, do a lot of business all over the place. And every time when I fly commercially in North America, the United States, and Canada, I sit by the window in a commercial planes
Yeah.
and I look outside and I say, it's paradise. It
Yeah.
is paradise. And
Right.
so many people are bitching and complaining, but they have no idea.
Yeah.
I grew up in war
Mhm.
and under the control of a dictator. Do
Mhm.
not try. If you want to try it for a little while, go to Russia, go to North Korea, go to Venezuela, go to Hungary for that matter, Cuba, and on and on and on and on. Do not, our government system may not be perfect, but the last thing you want is a dictator that
Mhm.
will change everything. And
Right.
I know it. I've been there. I've seen
Yeah.
the results. But it's still with me today.
I can feel it. I can feel it on you. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to reach out or have you on their show if possible?
JohnABrink.com.
JohnABrink.com. All right. So with all that, John, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to kind of use your imagination a little bit. You are, let's say, you're about 5 or 6 years old. You're in elementary school. That little boy is getting teased. He's getting told he's stupid by the teachers. He's getting held back. There's all sorts of turmoil happening around you. I want you to pretend that version of John has just come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement. Just talk, just kind of talk to him, and we'll officially close, man.
Everything is possible. Never, never, never give up. Never. And that to me, and fortunately, and as one, the learning system is changing slowly. For me, I have an obligation to speak out about it,
Yes.
about ADHD, and it usually doesn't come along. There's probably other things,
Mhm.
so that go with it. But for me, it has been an asset, not a liability, and I have an obligation to speak out about it and write about it. So the sky is the limit, and everything is possible. We're so lucky in North America.
Yes. I think we can officially drop the mic with that, folks. Go out and be someone. Stop making excuses and go out and actually accomplish things. All right. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.